Welcome. Thank you for being here today with us. Today we have Dr. Caran Howard and Dr. Gayle Rhineberger. Did I say that correct?
Yes.
Perfect. And today we're going to be talking about something I think it's really important for us not only as an institution, but also as teachers, as teaching evolves. We're going to be talking about online education. I think we're going to have a lot of fun talking about this topic, right? So, but before we start, I'm just going to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself so we know who we're talking today. So maybe Caran, you want to go first?
Sure. I started my career at UNI as a student, getting my BA here and my MA here. I went to Iowa for a short time for a PhD, but then I came back and working in online education. I started as an ID and then moved up, and I manage the ID team now. Mm-hmm. And so armpit deep in online education and loving it.
Yeah. And your role, so you are in distance education, so your role there is exactly...
Right. Managing the team that assists anybody who teaches online. They can come in and get assistance. They can get just some feedback on their courses. They can also get help with a full development. So the ID will work with them to build everything out in the course.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. Gayle?
This is my 21st year at UNI. I'm a professor of criminology and criminal justice. I coordinate and advise our two online programs, our BA in criminology and criminal justice and our BAS in criminal justice. And I think I tried to look, and I think I've been teaching online, not counting the guided independent studies, for about 15 years. At least one class. Now I'm up to pretty much 4 classes, at least a year.
Excellent.
I teach online.
Excellent. So one of the things, and I'll be also honest in this part. Like, one thing that I'm always curious, because I kind of like same path that you went through, Caran. Like, I had a teaching and learning background, being an ESL teacher. Then kind of became an instructional designer by incident, but it's kind of like an incidental. Situation. So my question to both of you is, how do you get involved? Like how do you get started in teaching online, and has this kind of like view or have your past shaping the way you approach online education?
I was an adjunct for 19 and a half years. So I guess I could say 20 years, but 19 and a half years. And I taught at Hawkeye, I taught at Wartburg, I taught here, I taught all over the place. And I taught in person, but I also taught online. And so I got to use all the different LMSs that are out there. And because I had that background with teaching online, that's what got me my position as an ID. So I did not study to be an instructional designer. But just having that experience really got me in. And the other thing is working with faculty members, having that teaching experience makes a huge difference, because I've been kind of boots on the ground with it. And then working with people for 10 years in this role, it's kind of like, it's a wealth of knowledge talking to people about what works, what doesn't work. And that really informs me, just those collaborative relationships with people. And that's how I kind of incidentally got into ID work, but it's really been amazing.
Yeah. What about you, Gayle?
I started with the guided independent study courses when I first got here. A couple of faculty were sort of done, wanted to get to offload those. But there was no training on how best to do it. It was just, here, put this online. We need some online courses that students can take if they can't take something on campus. They were great. They definitely evolved over time. My whole entire philosophy about teaching has changed in the past 7 or 8 years. Reading, the more you read about universal design for learning, ungrading, grading for growth, high impact practices in online learning, humanizing online education. So a lot of what I have switched to comes partly from reading all of those things, but also when I started to actually teach regular semester online courses, I took the Quality Matters training offered through, it wasn't ODE then, but through online ed. And while I was a little resistant to some of the things with my traditional, background where I went to grad school when they didn't really teach us how to be teachers. So it was like, why do we have to do all of this stuff? But once you start putting it into practice, it makes so much sense. And it's really helpful. I have taken almost all of the guidelines and practices that I've learned in Quality Matters and applied them to my in-person classes as well. Because what it does is a little bit of, it's not advertised this way, but I think because of the guidelines, a lot of it's humanizing some of that online education. Like, these are real humans who have a need to be online or prefer to be online because of mental health or their current situation, or they're locked in a particular space, that they are students with needs that we can provide. But we need to do so being cognizant of what their actual needs are. And the same with our changing body of on-campus students. Our student population doesn't look the same today as it did even 10 years ago. So I think with the Quality Matters, and then just the more you teach online and the more you read about online best practices, you change how you do things. It's making things clearer. It's understanding, coming to a realization that rigor does not, there's those two kinds of rigor, and one of them is just about barriers that aren't really meant. They prevent students from getting to do their best work. Some of that is strict deadlines. There's a reason for strict deadlines, don't get me wrong. I'm not, bashing anybody's strict deadlines, but strict deadlines is not rigor. You can build a rigorous course and still allow students access. We're primarily first gen here, and an older student population, continuously growing the older population of students with our online programs, that those students don't come necessarily with the same, actually this is true of in-person classes too, the same social and educational capital. So if barriers are put in place that really disadvantage students without that educational and social capital, then how can they succeed? And how can they succeed online when it's even a little trickier because of the way online is set up?
Yeah, I think that's important, the human element, and I want to go back to that in a little bit. I just want to explore, before we go to that part of the human element of online education, I want to talk a little bit about QM, like Quality Matters, what it is, and how really influenced how we design classes here at UNI.
When you dig into it, it's very common sense. It just makes sense. It's make your course easy to navigate. Give your students some transparency about how to do an assignment. So have guidelines. That way you don't have all the emails back and forth, which is stressful for both parties, right? So be transparent about that. Be transparent about how you're going to grade and your expectations. And that way students can focus on the learning and just get right to it. There are 8 standards in this rubric that's Quality Matters, and within each of those 8 standards there are specific review standards, and they really kind of break things down. They talk about content that aligns with your assessments. They talk about learning objectives at the course level, at the module level, and that everything needs to align with those. And that's great, and students appreciate that, because if you are giving all of these tests, but it doesn't align with what they're supposed to learn, it's busy work, And so it makes sense to make things align and match up, to be clear, to make it easy to use. That way you focus on your rigor, the learning, and the teaching part. And so that, in a nutshell, that's Quality Matters. But if anybody has questions, they can let me know.
Yeah, absolutely. If people have questions about QN, how we apply it here at UNI, please contact Caran, and we're gonna make sure that we have your contact info on the description, so people can reach out to you on that part. And to be honest, I have applied Quality Matters in a couple of my courses, and it really helps. And I really love the thing that I really love about QM is this idea of alignment between learning outcomes, materials, assessments, but also the alignment between the course learning outcomes and the unit learning outcomes, or like whatever you want to call it in your course design, right? It's like that granular that really helps you to understand how the things should be connected, that sometimes we think, oh, this is really cool and I'm going to ask them to do this. But then, helps you to step back and think about, but does it really connect to the larger learning outcomes, right?
Right. Does it scaffold up?
Yes.
Yes. Right.
So absolutely. So yeah. One other thing that, we were talking about, and Gayle, you mentioned this, was this idea about connections, right? And these, I would say, myth, right, between all us educators, that only in the classroom, and I said, like, again, as a myth, only the physical classroom is the one that can achieve this connection with students. How do we reconcile that with the idea of being maybe present in an online classroom?
There's a lot of ways that you can build community and build relationships with students and allow students to build relationships with each other. Some of it just comes down to putting in a little bit of work in a different way. So one of the things that I do is, I used to require it when I had smaller classes, but now with 45 to 50 students in an online class, and I teach 2 of them each semester, I won't require individual meetings with me before midterm, because I don't have that kind of time. But I have a paragraph in my syllabus that allows it for extra credit. They can either make an appointment to see me, or they can come to these, I have about 6 of them scattered throughout the semester, group Zooms, where they can just drop in. And sometimes we have 5 or 6 students, and we talk about sometimes stuff directly related to class, or about questions they have on an assignment, or about random criminal justice topics. It really depends on who shows up. But in my syllabus, it says why I encourage them. It's because I want to see them as humans, and it's important that they see me as a human, and not just that we're exchanging ideas through a box. So that they don't see me as a robot just randomly out there. Personality doesn't come through on paper. And I think that the only way to make those connections with students in an online class is to offer them opportunities. All of my classes are asynchronous because of the population I teach. Criminal justice is a everyday 24-hour shifts, covering 24 hours of shifts, that we don't have a specific time that we could say, all right, we can offer online synchronous courses, because they wouldn't be able to take them. So we don't do that, but you can offer those sort of individual learning. It does require, for me, sometimes having late meetings with students. I've had meetings at 6 o'clock at night. I mean, I'm in my house, because I can be, but and I tell them pretty much every announcement I send, if you can't, I encourage you to make appointments to meet with me. If you can't find a time in my calendar, please let me know sometimes you are available. I'm willing to meet outside of normal business hours, because I know that you are working at different times. Another way to do that is the introductory discussion board. I post a little bit about myself, and it doesn't include a lot about my academic background. I mean, students don't fundamentally care too much about where I got my degree or how long I've been teaching, but I share with them like some of my interests, because that's part of what I want them to share. It's about what is your major? What do you plan to do for a career? What are some of your favorite things to do? What do you do in your for pastimes? And I encourage them to submit pictures. So I do the same. And I put pictures of, me with goats at goat yoga, or me with a cat and a glass of wine on my patio, because that's what I like to do. And that gives students an opportunity to respond in a discussion board where they don't have to see me face to face, but they can see me in the discussion board. And then then we can have a little interaction. And it really makes me a human to them and not just a professor that doesn't have a personality and sits behind a computer all day long. So I have found that to be really useful. And I think regular discussion boards can build community if they're done well. There are good discussion boards where I think they're used a little bit more for grading purposes, for content knowledge. I don't treat my discussion boards like that. I treat it more like attendance and participation. So I tell them, I make sure it's clear, I am not grading how much you can regurgitate material in these. This is an opportunity for you to discuss with your classmates the things you want to discuss. So in a lot of my classes, I have at the end of every assignment, written assignment that they do, they write discussion questions. And then I say, post one of your discussion questions. And in this final reflection essay that I do for every class, where I get far better feedback than I ever do in the student evaluations, the official ones, that students like that opportunity to be able to ask what they want to talk about. In the couple of classes where I have some discussion boards with specific things, there's scenarios. And it's a what would you do if you were in this position, which again isn't about the content of the class. It's about just talking about maybe, and sometimes they do throw in things that they learned in the book or in the materials or a video. But that again is allowing them to be themselves, you know, in a way that we would do in a classroom when we tell them to talk about something. I mean, I don't monitor every single conversation, so they're talking some personal stuff. They're talking about them, whatever I ask them to talk about. But it builds a community in a way that you don't get if your discussion boards are about the instructor wanting to grade content knowledge.
Right, summarize a chapter.
Yep. Or, you know, what did the author say about this, and what are the 3 points? You know, and sometimes I give them a choice. Post one of your discussion questions or talk about the most important thing that you learned from that video or the materials for the week. And it provides them agency. And as we know, the more you give students options, the better they perform. We've talked about this before with even if you can allow some alternatives. Final projects, could you do a podcast? Could you do a paper? Can you do a poster or a presentation?
Yep.
And students really do like that. It doesn't always work out great, but it is certainly better than reading this, for me.
The same thing over and over
The
again.
same paper when I have 45 students in a class, I can't do. I mean, of course we can do it. I do not want to do that.
And they're less likely to use AI.
Yes.
If it's something where they actually have an opinion. You know, it's a prompt that they've picked and means something to them. And I think that humanizes it too, obviously, because then you don't have the AI talking to each other. Yep. You know, but it's like if you care about it, you're going to write something that's meaningful to you. And other people might care about that too and connect.
Yeah. And AI definitely, I mean, that train has left the station. It is everywhere. And we all use it. And there are some good ways to use it as faculty, and there's bad ways, just as there are for students. And I allow my students to use AI, but I tell them in my syllabus why, when, and where it's appropriate. Oh, you want to, you know, here is a good place to use it when you're coming up with your final project or a topic for a final paper. But do not use it in discussion boards because I'm not grading how perfect you wrote or that you could regurgitate material to me. So I think that helps them. And I do have students, I tell them to write at the bottom if they, you know, if they've used AI and how they've used it. And some of them are really diligent. I used it for Grammarly. I used it to, you know, make things sound a little better. And students have said, I used it to understand this one concept better.
Yep.
And sometimes they did not use AI.
I want to actually explore. I have a question that is going to be related to AI, but I want to pose this question first. We also talk a lot about the students being digital natives, right?
Yeah.
Also, I feel, right, that when we say digital natives, I feel us, not only as educators, but as more adults than our students. We mean different things than our students. I feel our students are digitally connected, right? They're on their phones, like whether that's good or bad, like I feel that's another discussion, right? But they are growing up with these kind of technologies that we didn't, right? How do you feel that I don't want to say disconnect, but that dichotomy in terms of they are digital natives, right? But do they have digital skills? Do you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm asking?
Can they represent themselves and, moving toward a profession? I'm a professional student.
Yes.
And I think making assumptions about, people know how to use a discussion board. People know how to submit something, and use Microsoft Word or something like that. So I think including, like Gayle was saying, in your syllabus, hey, these are the expectations for technology. And listing those. And actually, that's one of the Quality Matters specific review standards, is being clear about what do they need to know coming into the class to be successful. Do they need to use Microsoft Word? Do they need to be able to record something and edit it? That sort of thing. I think making assumptions about, they've been on computers their whole lives. Well, but doing what? Maybe not classes. So I think that's huge, is prepping them.
I think as you said, we make an assumption that students just know how to do it.
Yeah.
And they do know how to do some things. That doesn't mean they can problem solve in a moment, like how to look something up or how to intuit something that isn't maybe clear, but the answer is really right there if you continue to read. And that is one issue. But I think we have to get away from expecting them to just come in and sit down and be successful without having a lot of instruction. To assume that they know how to capture a video or narrate a PowerPoint or even put a poster together. Right. If we're going to require those, we should have some instruction. Yep. But I think it's because we expect it, but then that means we're also not very aware then of our student body. Right. Our student body is older than it used to be. We aren't talking about, our campus still is younger, but nationally, the age of college students is higher than it was before. Something like 25% of them have dependents, and close to 50% of them are working or over 20 hours a week.
Especially online.
And online, yes, it's an entirely different ballgame online. And, and I teach, when I teach online classes, it's a mix of resident students who want to take online classes and fully online students. I need to not assume a whole lot about either one of those populations because you'd be surprised. Yep. I think there are ways that we can sort of help them. I think we can basically assume that they have read things online because this is what K through 12. And a lot of the students we have now were in high school during COVID. So or middle school, high school during COVID. So they have had some exposure, but we can't assume they can just craft something good.
Right. So if you're going to expect them to, like say for a speech course, if they're going to record speeches that they'll be graded on and then have peer feedback, a nice way to scaffold that and make it low stakes is for your introduction, record something. I'm not going to nail you on the grading for that, but it introduces you to the tools. You can flub it. It's okay. You'll get some feedback and you'll get used to it. That way, when the time comes to do that for an assessment, which is higher stakes, they've got that under their belt, which is a nice thing to do. You can scaffold things like that all across your course.
Yeah, and that's what I'm teaching an online class this semester, and I used my introduction discussion, and basically, like at the beginning of the class, I told them there's going to be not a lot of discussion, but each unit is going to have one, and it's going to be video based. So you're going to record a video. So here's a tutorial on how you're going to record your video. how it's submitted on Blackboard. So you learn those skills now. Also, I love to use not only on top of Quality Matters, but I really love to use the TEL framework, the Transparency in Teaching and Learning, because you can list the skills there. So they know what skills they need in order to complete the task.
Yep.
And I list, okay, you need to know how to share a Google Doc, for example. And here's a link to a tutorial. So they are receiving that all the time. But that helps me because I always have one or two students saying, oh, I don't know how to do this, which is okay. Face-to-face classes, same thing happens, right? But that has decreased my emailing, entire weekend. Hey, I cannot submit this, I cannot submit this, right?
Well, and I think, in thinking about our online students, we have students coming back who were in college before they really, they didn't register online. They don't understand some of that system. So some of the things we can do to help students is to be conscientious of how we're designing our courses, how we're chunking material, how we're explaining material, and being consistent. So I don't worry as much in my in-person classes if I have assignment due on a Monday one week or a Wednesday or a Friday. In my online classes, it is very deliberately, each class has a specific day when something is due. The discussion boards are always open at 1 a.m. on this day. The replies are due 11:59 p.m. on this day, and then 5 original posts due, and then 5 replies due on this day every week. And if I have to make a deviation, sometimes because of where spring break might fall or Thanksgiving, that I will send a message note. In my weekly announcements, I will make a note that pay attention to this week because the assignment is going to be due a day earlier and the discussion boards are moved up a day. So being consistent and honestly, 11:59 p.m. works great. The 12 a.m. doesn't because then, it's just a little weirder. I don't really care if they turn it in at 12:10 a.m. I'm not going to tell them that's late. But being consistent, being very clear about late work, being very clear about resubmissions, if you allow them, being clear about how you grade. And this is, again, it's more important in some ways to be clear about it and to use that, a 10-minute introduction on the very first day of class video. Those are wonderful. It's not about reviewing the syllabus. It's kind of like how, if you think about it, rock the first day kind of stuff. How do you rock the first day in an online class? Not by reading the syllabus either, particularly you don't do that in an in-person class necessarily either, but it's different because you can break it up with other things. But in the online world, it's that 10 minutes is really key to express a little bit about what your expectations are about how you grade. So I hit those high points about my discussion boards that I'm not looking for perfection in anything. That you can use Grammarly, but I also want your authentic voice to come in because I'm not grading on perfection. I don't need perfection in my field. I keep in mind when I say these things that that's because of the discipline I'm in. I have that luxury. I'm not training medical students who are going to need to know how to put body parts back together after they cut someone open. Or, engineering, chemistry, yes, they have to know A before they can do B, or boom. So I'm conscientious of the fact that while I can say I do these things, it's the luxury of the discipline that I'm in that I don't have to search for that kind of perfection, that I can give them some flexibility in how they think and to let them explore things and to tell them, in some cases, this doesn't have to work perfectly. I want you to try it. And if it doesn't work, talk about why you think this didn't work. And they do, frankly, they do better work because they aren't pushing for a grade in the same way.
About it.
Yeah, and I think that's important to, at least in certain disciplines, right? Like there is a lot of disciplines that you will deal with gray areas rather than black and white. So I think, like as you were saying, in your case, I feel criminal justice, that's the context there, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things that you will deal that are not necessarily black and white, and instead of like know ABC, you need to know how to apply ABC. So it's more like apply rather than like other disciplines that you need to you need to be more precise. I think that's the better word there, precise.
Yeah, it would be different if we were training academy, if we were like a police academy or a correctional academy, where the stakes are different, right? Mm-hmm. But they're going to learn the actual specifics of the law and how Iowa does things. If they go to the police academy or if they work in corrections, they go to specific training that gives them those tools. I don't need to teach them the specifics of law, of some search and seizure. I'm never going to tell them how to do that because I would tell them probably incorrectly. Even if I read a law, even if I knew the local department's policy inside and out, it's still not how it might be practiced. Yeah. In person.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to, we were talking just a little bit about how our students are dealing with, technology, right? Mm-hmm. AI, right? 3 years ago, big disruption, not only in higher education, but everywhere, right? Including criminal justice, right? So how is this, and we are in year 3, and every time that I talk about AI, I try to emphasize that part. We're in year 3 of when we all got disrupted, right? How is this new technology shaping or maybe shifting the way we are thinking and designing these online experiences for our students?
I think in some ways people are less fearful and they're more able to talk about it rather than ignoring it. So I see more people having syllabus policies, AI policies in their syllabus. I talk to a lot of people when we collaborate on their course design about, hey, I know that these essays and these discussion boards, it's just AI. What do I do? And so bringing in the idea of authentic assessment and talking with people and getting them excited and then getting their students excited about it has been great. There's still a lot of, I'm sure in nursing or I know College of Business struggles with this, students using AI to cheat for tests. And so there's discussions about proctoring. That's another tangent. But I feel better about we're not as afraid of it. And more people are looking into training their students because it's going to be a thing. And so if you're going to graduate students from you and I, from the College of Business, don't you want to train them how to be good practitioners? So including that in your teaching instead of just saying don't. How is it applicable? How is it ethical? When can you do it? Should you do it? When should you not? And why? And really getting into the why. Like Gayle was saying, is I want your authentic voice. I want to see your learning. If you give me AI, I don't see your learning, and then I'm going to have to talk to you about whatever my policy is. So I like the fact that people are kind of getting away from the fear factor of it and moving forward so that they still can have those connections with students and still feel hopeful about online ed.
Yeah. And, I didn't know anything about AI. I was exposed to it at a conference, and I was like, I don't even know what that is. And this would have been 3 or 4 years ago. But it was like this chatter, and it was an online learning conference. But I was so oblivious. I was sort of like, I don't understand. I couldn't wrap my head around it then. And it, is a little frightening, but the calculator was frightening too. People were fearful of the calculator, that people would not be able to do math.
Or spell check.
Yes. And so it's new technology. And it's, and we absolutely should pay attention. We should, and I don't want to say we should be fearful, but we should be cautious in in understanding what it does, how it impacts us. AI is used around us. We use it in ways we probably don't fully recognize every day. It would be, I wouldn't be doing my job as a university professor if I didn't expose my students to what AI is and how it's being used in particular fields in my discipline, but also teaching them how to use it, because there are benefits. If you look at some of the research, there was a study that just looked at some architecture students, the ones who didn't use AI and the ones who were allowed to use AI to help them understand things grew the most and had better outcomes in the end. And I mean, it's going to be a piece of social capital that is going to mean some students get jobs and some don't because they don't understand it. They're scared of it. We can be scared of it and still understand it and use it, but that also then makes us more likely to use it ethically.
Yep.
And to teach our students to use it ethically. So having an AI syllabus policy, and I know that you have workshops on this, and I've went to every workshop I can possibly take
Thank you.
that you offer, because especially when I was like, I think we need to teach AI in the justice system class, and I'm gonna have to teach it. And I read the Co-Intelligence book by Malik, and I read that in the summer. That book traveled several states with me into, parks, national parks, and it was illuminating to me how it's already used, how important it is for us, and how I can use it in my own life. But then to not just tell students not to use it, because you can tell them not to use a calculator and that doesn't mean they're not going to use it. So teaching, having that syllabus statement is important. And there's all kinds of Substacks on AI and education. And, it does clog up my email inbox, but there's such good stuff in there. And some good practices and some scary things too about what's up and coming and the people who are looking at trends. But it's really useful. And so understanding, being clear in that syllabus policy that, AI is here. It's okay if you use it, but here's how and why I don't want you to use it. Here's how and where it's appropriate. And then, I'm not going to tell them not to use it because I use it. And I have found it to be exceedingly helpful in creating new scenarios for classes. It's not perfect. I have to do the work,
Right.
I have to do the work of figuring out what I want and then modifying what it gives me to make it, one, fit how I talk and what I expect. But those are good ways to use it and to tell students. I don't go in and tell my students or make them think that I created everything myself. I mean, back when I created lectures, I was pulling from 10 different textbooks to write a lecture.
Right.
AI is very similar. It's just faster.
And you give your attributions.
Yep.
Right? You cite your sources. Sure.
Yeah. With that said, and I want to start wrapping up this really interesting conversation. One thing that I always say it's constant is change, right? Like COVID was a change, 6 years ago, thinking about that 6 years ago.
That's wild.
Right, that's wild, right? Then 3 years ago is AI. So there's always something, coming at us. If you want to put your kind of predictor hat on, what do you think the trends are going to be in the next couple of years in online education?
I think because, all the student loan stuff and everything, students want to get what they're paying for. And I think part of what they want in that equation is preparation for work, and also the humanization part. They want connections. They don't want to be throwing money just at a machine, so they want that training. They want it to be meaningful to them personally. So that means having some agency, and they're looking for the cost benefit. And why shouldn't they? So I think really looking into, and it's not a predictor, but it's what I think we should do to stay around, is to make sure that we're meaningful for students. And that's the way that we're going to have them not only enroll, but persist and maybe come back, you know?
Yeah, that I feel that humanization of
Yeah.
online learning, right? It's gonna be huge.
It's key.
Yeah.
It's key. And accessibility. I mean, if we can market that we have accessibility, that's a whole new group of students that we can get. And AI can help us with that too.
Yes. Gayle, any predictions that you want to throw?
I think in some disciplines we're going to see a continued steady increase in online populations because students are sort of landlocked in some ways, but also their lives. And, you know, we have older students. They need to work with the student loans, even without student loans. You know, some students don't get enough student loan money because of what their parents might make. But that doesn't mean that money trickles down to the student's college education.
Yes.
And so students have to work. And I think, you know, we can't continue to teach like it's 1870. It's just not. And even the reason for higher ed is different today than it was when colleges were first created, right? Like that was about an informed citizenry. And this is about informed citizenry, but it's also skills. And tangible skills, but also, I don't do a good job, and I don't think as many college institutions do a good job of talking about the soft skills that don't come through, the writing, the communication, the stuff that's really important. But you can do those online if you have the tools to do them well. So I think we're going to see a rise in some disciplines, particularly in online ed. I hope that there's a growth in support, greater support institutionally for online students. I think when we first started some online teaching at UNI, there was a huge disconnect. Sitting in faculty senate meetings and hearing the way that people talked about online ed and online students was really disjointed. It was really disconnected to the reality of the purpose of online education. And I think that has changed on campus, but I think there's still growth needed. And I think we need a greater integration of online students as part of our student body.
Right.
And they're going to want it, as Caran was saying, but also it's just important. They don't necessarily, they aren't going to get the same experience as a campus student, but there isn't any reason we can't strive to have some of those mechanisms in place so that they can be successful, just as our campus students are.
Right.
Well, Caran, Gayle, thank you so much for spending this time with us today, and I hope I'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.